May 1945. On top of a jagged cliff on the island of Okinawa, American soldiers are being torn apart by Japanese gunfire. Most survivors retreat. One man stays behind, alone, on the battlefield under fire. He has no rifle. He never carried one. He refused to, on religious grounds. From the very first day, he joined the army. By the time he was done, he had lowered 75 wounded men down that cliff to safety, one at a time, with a rope he tied himself. This is the true story of Desmond Doss, the only man to receive the Medal of Honor for a battle. He never fired a single shot in. Desmond Doss grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia, raised in a devout Seventh-day Adventist household. From childhood, he held two convictions that would define his entire life: an unwavering religious faith and a solemn commitment to the sixth commandment, "Thou shalt not kill." When World War II broke out and the draft began, Doss didn't try to avoid service. He believed serving his country was his duty, but he refused to carry a weapon or even to work on the Sabbath. He requested classification as a conscientious objector who would still serve, specifically as a combat medic, on the front lines, unarmed. The Army had a different classification in mind. Many labeled him a coward before he ever set foot on a battlefield. Fellow soldiers mocked him during training. Some officers actively tried to have him discharged or reassigned, believing an unarmed man on a battlefield would inevitably get himself, and others, killed. Doss refused to back down. He insisted he could serve his country and honor his faith at the same time. The Army, reluctantly, let him try. Doss trained as a combat medic and was assigned to the 77th Infantry Division. Early deployments in the Pacific Theater, including brutal fighting on Guam and Leyte, gave him his first real tests under fire. Timement. In October 1945, Desmond Doss became the first conscientious objector in American history to receive the Medal of Honor, the United States' highest military decoration, presented to him personally by President Harry Truman. Doss carried the physical toll of his service for the rest of his life. Lasting injuries from his wounds, and tuberculosis contracted during his time in the Pacific, which cost him a lung and led to decades of ongoing health struggles. He rarely sought public attention for his actions, consistently deflecting credit toward his faith and the soldiers he served alongside. He passed away in 2006, at the age of 87. The ridge was a 400-foot cliff, and at the top, entrenched Japanese forces had built one of the most heavily fortified defensive positions American troops had encountered in the entire Pacific campaign. On May 5, 1945, American forces scaled the cliff using cargo nets and began their assault. What followed was catastrophic. Japanese defenders, dug into caves and tunnels, unleashed devastating fire. American casualties mounted rapidly, and within hours, the surviving soldiers were forced into a chaotic retreat back down the cliff. Doss refused to retreat. While the battlefield remained under active enemy fire, he moved alone across the ridge, locating wounded soldiers one at a time, many of them lying in the open, exposed to Japanese gunners who could see them clearly. He dragged each wounded man to the edge of the cliff, tied a simple knot he had devised himself, and lowered them down the sheer rock face to safety below, one at a time, using a hand-tied rope harness. According to multiple first-hand accounts and later investigations, Doss continued this process for hours, working largely alone, all while remaining unarmed on a battlefield still under fire. He reportedly kept repeating a quiet prayer to himself throughout. "Lord, help me get one more." By the time the ridge was finally secured days later, Doss was credited with saving approximately 75 men during that single engagement alone, though Doss himself, in later interviews, insisted the number was likely closer to 50, saying he didn't personally believe it could have been that high. Doss's service on Okinawa didn't end there. In the days following the ridge assault, he continued treating wounded soldiers under fire, and was himself wounded by a grenade, suffering severe shrapnel injuries to his legs. While waiting for evacuation, he reportedly noticed a more critically wounded soldier nearby and insisted medics treat that soldier first, despite his own injuries. Later, while being carried on a stretcher, Doss was struck again. This time his arm was shattered by a sniper's bullet. In a moment that has since become part of his enduring legend, He reportedly directed the stretcher bearers carrying him to instead help a more critically wounded soldier nearby, then crawled nearly 300 yards on his own to find further help, using a rifle as an improvised splint for his shattered arm. In October 1945, Desmond Doss became the first conscientious objector in American history to receive the Medal of Honor, the United States' highest military decoration, presented to him personally by President Harry Truman. Doss carried the physical toll of his service for the rest of his life. Lasting injuries from his wounds, and tuberculosis contracted during his time in the Pacific, which cost him a lung and led to decades of ongoing health struggles. He rarely sought public attention for his actions, consistently deflecting credit toward his faith and the soldiers he served alongside. He passed away in 2006 at the age of 87. Desmond Doss never fired a single bullet in the entire war. He never carried a weapon, not even once. And yet by the time the fighting ended, he had directly saved more lives on that one battlefield than almost any other individual soldier in the entire Pacific campaign. He proved that courage doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Sometimes, it looks like running toward danger with nothing but a rope, a prayer, and a promise he refused to break. If this story moved you the way it moved us, subscribe. Next time, we're telling the story of a single tank crew that held off an entire advancing enemy column, alone.